We're standing here today in the Cross Hall, the long central corridor on the state floor of the White House. This hallway and the adjoining entrance hall and the grand staircase nearby are the locations for the portraits of the most recent former presidents. Today's portrait of interest is above my right shoulder, is the Aaron Schickler 1971 portrait of President John F. Kennedy. Perhaps a little more unusual than other portraits in our collection by having assumed this contemplative pose, which was described at the period as being a way that the president was often seen in photographs. The portrait was inspired by a request from Mrs. Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy had asked Schickler to do studies for a portrait of herself, and at the time he was visiting with her, she raised the question whether he would consider doing a posthumous portrait of President Kennedy. Schickler thought about it. Mrs. Kennedy sent him some photographs, and he tried to contemplate how he might paint the portrait of a subject that he had never actually had sit for him. Mrs. Kennedy sent a New York Times article and said that she had been interested and haunted almost by the photograph that the Times had used with the article about the death of her brother-in-law, Senator Kennedy. And it showed President Kennedy with his back to the camera in a contemplative pose, and his brother Robert, who was then the Attorney General, in profile in a contemplative pose, as they were considering the world-shattering activities of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. And she said, "I've been haunted by this picture, and I think it would be the right one to inspire a portrait for the White House." Schickler studied it and decided he would create something that would capture the strength, the courage, but as he said, it wasn't dire solitude in the president's part because he had his brother there with him. And so this pose that is not a traditional one, since you don't see his eyes, it's in this facing down pose, that was what he captured as how to remember President Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy came back to the White House only once, in 1971, at the request of President and Mrs. Richard Nixon, when the portraits were ready to be hung in the White House. And she brought the children, Caroline, who was then 13, and John Jr., who was 10. And they visited rooms that they had lived in, and they went to the Oval Office and saw the portraits. And she said this was a very moving experience. And that was the only time she returned to the White House after leaving in 1963.